Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Steps to Build Reciprocal Partnerships webinar. My name is Megan Thomas. I'm 17 years old and I live in Missouri. I have the incredible honor to serve on the National Youth Leadership Council's Youth Advisory Council, which is a team of young servant leaders dedicated to promoting youth leadership, service learning, youth and adult partnerships, youth voice, and diversity. I'm pleased to have a few of my incredible Youth Advisory Council colleagues joining today's webinar, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Denasia Eubanks. I am currently 16 years old and I reside in North Carolina.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Patel. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Pennsylvania. Our fellow Youth Advisory Council member, Sam Smith, worked very hard in helping make sure that this webinar would be successful, but unfortunately he is not able to be with us. Also along with us are Marcus.
Hello.
Hi. So as a national organization, we're all coming from various areas of the country. We want to know where you guys are all coming from. Please use the arrow that can be found on the top left corner of the screen to share what state you're from. We have Arway from Minnesota and Denasia from North Carolina. We have Kia from Minnesota. Whoa, there's a lot of people from Minnesota. We have, excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong, Yvonne from North Carolina, Stacy from Kentucky, Callie from Georgia. There's a lot of people from Minnesota. Wow. We have David from California. So exciting to see how many people we have.
Okay, so I always find excited too to see how many people are from all over. I will briefly go over the agenda. We will start this webinar with evaluating partnership needs, and this will lead into strategies for effective communication, inclusive of youth voice, community needs, and then a closing with a quote.
So let's take a look at the first step to successfully creating a reciprocal partnership. Your first stepping stone must be evaluation, because every potential partnership is unique. To create a healthy, advantageous relationship, it's necessary to identify the aspects that foster partnerships, such as things like mutual needs. These 8 characteristics that you see on your screen can be used as a guide to developing and even improving partnerships. I'd like to ask for some audience participation, if you would all be so kind. So feel free to chime in using your chat boxes in the bottom right corner. My first question for you is, what types of motivations keep a partnership thriving? I see David says that mutual needs definitely are a big part of the motivations that keep a partnership thriving. Stacy says mutual benefits. Rebecca, shared objectives. Arway, mutual needs. Daniel, expectations. Yvonne, mutual needs. These are all great characteristics of what a partnership really has in the motivation area. Those are the kind of things that help form your mission and really help find your goal for your partnership. So it's a great thing to look at when you're first evaluating the partnership, finding out the mission of what you guys want to do as a partnership. So thank you guys all for that contribution. So now let's evaluate the balance of a partnership. How does a partnership effectively balance its responsibilities and expectations? a little bit of silence out there. That's all right. One way that partnerships can really look at the effective balance of partnerships, the effective balancing of responsibilities and expectations is coming together as a group in a partnership and deciding on these expectations and responsibilities on their own. If everyone agrees with the expectations and responsibilities, then it's much easier for people to make sure that they meet those goals and those needs. So evaluating past, current, and potential partnerships serves to emphasize how an effective partnership operates. These questions and their answers set the standard for strong partnerships. Another question that I'd like to ask is, what are the things that you need to think about before you begin a partnership? What kind of things do you in your current partnerships have that are really important to you? All right, David says that it's important for them to have shared objectives. That's a great point. Daniel, same mission. Deborah, respect our way vision. Yvonne, identify needs of both organizations. Those are all great ideas. They're all very important that you understand what needs to be done to create the partnership. And these examples here are great because it helps serve as a foundation for how your partnership should work. So thank you all for that. After you've been able to contemplate the many facets of partnerships like these, it will become easier to recognize and solve possible problems. The ability to assess strengths and weaknesses will only serve to strengthen your partnerships, and it will improve your ability to effectively interact with your partners. And Stacy says communication is very important, and it looks like you're psychic because that's my next point. So if we look on to the next step of partnerships, we really look at efficient communication and how important it is. Finding an effective balance of the communication in a partnership is incredibly difficult, but the daunting task is well worth it. So communication can make or break partnerships. It's important to understand the methods that your partners use, whether it's via face-to-face meetings, email, phone, Skype, or texting. Recognizing and utilizing different manners of communicating will help you quickly adapt and solve any issues that arise. It's really very important that you know how to communicate in more than one method. For instance, if I only communicated with the Pony Express, it would be very difficult for anyone to communicate with me. That's a joke, feel free to laugh. So partnerships are most efficient when they're built upon strong, truthful, and all-inclusive communication. So it really should be things like honesty and sincerity that are really important in that communication. The best approach to communicating is understanding that nothing will ever be perfect. Life happens, and it's exceptionally important to inform your partners of all pertinent information. Transparency and continuous conversations ensure that everyone is involved and informed. Let your partners know if you experience an issue. So, which method of communication helps you the most? Feel free to, again, use your chat boxes. Give me some examples of how you communicate and why they're important to you. All right, Deborah, email. I completely agree because if you can tell, it's a little more difficult for me to speak than for me to write. David says whatever my partner prefers. That's a great attitude to have when communicating, really just that understanding between the two people or more than one or two people. Daniel says, I prefer phone, but email makes it easier to reach multiple people at one time. That's very, very true. I know conference calls are huge in the organization that I work for. Very, very helpful. Callie, a mix of email and phone. Yvonne, initial face-to-face meetings to build a relationship and follow-up email. That's a really good idea as well because it really does establish that connection between your partners, and then you can build upon that as well. Those are all great examples. Thank you guys so much for that. It just really serves to emphasize the point that communication is so important, and there are so many ways to communicate and interact with your partners that it's very, very important that you understand those methods. So every question, concern, and problem just strengthens partnerships. It's very important to remember that partnerships depend on the frequent and authentic collaboration and reciprocality of its partners. Overall, just be sure that your voice is heard. Oh, look, that's my name.
Hey guys, this is Liz speaking again. So like Megan said, it's super important to evaluate mutual needs, shared objectives, and responsibilities. Now let's talk about youth voice and youth and adult partnerships. A youth and adult partnership is when adults work with young people on mutual interests to better their community. Now if everyone could kindly answer this question, why is youth voice important? Megan says it fosters participation from all generations. Callie says it ensures engagement and interest. Annie says diversity of ideas. Yvonne says it allows young people the opportunity to share ideas and build upon their own expertise. Daniel says youth voice is important because it makes sure that we are fulfilling our mission. It makes us evaluate consistently. And Doug says our future depends on youth. These are all great responses. So the National Youth Leadership Council partners with schools, out-of-school clubs, and youth directly to make sure that they are engaged through service learning. NYLC's goal is to develop youth leaders by providing support they need to accomplish challenges and issues in their community. This is why the Youth Advisory Council exists. Now we're going to talk about some skills that you can learn while working with youth and adults. When youth partner with adults, it provides youth with opportunities and challenges them to achieve new skill building. Youth learn responsibility. They're expected to be on task and consistent, like working in a professional job. They also learn communication skills. Youth will learn how important it is to communicate, whether it's by emailing, texting, calling, or verbally communicating. Essential information needs to be passed back and forth between youth and adults to make a partnership successful. Just like my colleague Megan said, communication is super important. Decision-making is also very essential. Consider every option and be sure to come to a consensus with your whole team. Lastly, leadership is learned. Every leader's goal is to be effective and successful. While it is important to know skills like listening and being rational, you also need to recognize how to handle situations when things don't go as planned. Keep your priorities in check and always encourage one another. Moving on to the next slide, we'll be talking about some tips to include youth voice. If everybody could answer this question, do any of you have any ideas on how youth voice can be included when in a partnership or working on a service learning project? Chelsea says it's important to get a read on how the students view the organization and its work. Daniel says that youth can help plan. Stacy says making sure that young people are involved at decision-making moments. These are all great answers, guys. So moving on, it is essential that each young person, youth or adult, has an equal voice. Each party should be able to express their opinions and be listened to with respect. Encourage new insights and contribution to both age groups. Don't automatically shut down an opinion or idea. Don't make assumptions of personalities and knowledge of age groups. Each person has their own experience, but are often judged and don't want to contribute their thoughts. High expectations should be established. Don't expect less from youth because some may be inexperienced, and don't expect less from adults because they may not be familiar with new technologies and ways of completing tasks. Lastly, having a positive attitude is key. Your attitude sometimes will determine the outcome of a situation. As I said on the previous slide, it is important to encourage and motivate your colleagues. Now we're going to talk about some tips that can benefit youth. Here's a question for all of the adults participating. What are some qualities and expectations that you adults look for while working with youth? David says he expects open lines of communication and mutual expectation. Arway agrees with David and says that youth should be open. Megan's getting ahead of herself. She's answering my next question, but she says adults look for maturity and the ability to work under pressure. Chelsea says reliability. These are all really good characteristics. Now here's a question for the youth participating. What are some characteristics and expectations youth in the audience look for while partnering with adults? Denasia looks for support, which is so important. Chelsea says, I also look for students who will strengthen the partners' opinions of our group and organization. Megan says, I look for understanding and also support and mentoring. It's important to be able to rely on your mentors as well as they will be relying on you. Doug says he wants to be treated equal. Arway says commitment. Again, these are all really good characteristics to have while working with youth and adults. So moving on, listen to criticisms. Criticism doesn't necessarily mean condensation or that an adult doesn't value your contribution. It may mean the adult is treating you the same way he or she would an adult colleague. Remember that adults are used to critiquing each other's work and offering constructive ideas to improve a project. Disagreement doesn't always mean disrespect. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Adults often use words or phrases that you might not understand. This goes out to adults too. It's better to ask questions than to do something wrong and have to do it all over again. Lastly, being successful is everyone's goal, and everyone's definition of being successful can vary. Sometimes projects fall through and fail, but you can use that as a learning experience to focus on what you can do to achieve better next time. So it's important to share success and failure. Thank you guys for listening to why youth is important and learning new tips for youth and adult partnerships. Now my colleague Denasia will explain how to address community needs. Thank you guys again.
Thank you, Liz. In regards to the information that you all just learned from Megan and Liz, something that we involve both Youth Voice and building partnerships in is when you're trying to address a community need. So now we will have a more interactive discussion to kind of share how we actually address community needs in our own community. I will ask you all a question, and I just want you to respond in the chat box. The first question that I will have is, how would you rate the importance of building partnerships when addressing a community need on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very important and 1 being not so important? Chelsea said 5. Callie said 5. Rebecca said 5. Daniel said 4. Daniel, do you mind me asking why you think of 4? Kia said 5. Elizabeth said 5. David said 5. Okay, that's good. Megan said a 5 to understand how best to address that need. Okay, I definitely agree. That's good. Thank you all for your feedback. The second question that I have is, how many of you have or have not formed partnerships with others to address a community need? If you have, how did you go about doing this? David said approaching like-minded individuals and organizations to collaborate on a mutual agreeable project. Okay. Megan said her service learning group partnered with student council to work together in a food drive. They addressed the community need of malnutrition and hunger. That sounds interesting. Chelsea said we looked at the assets in the community to see who our students can learn from. Daniel has done a partnership. If we ourselves cannot offer a service to meet a need of our youth, I seek out parallel organizations. That's good. Thank you. The last question that I have is, what do you think is important for people to know when building partnerships while addressing community needs? ROA says relationships should be mutually beneficial. Agreed. David says what we want to accomplish and how we think it can be done. Chelsea says to be open and honest about what you can and cannot provide in the service. Callie says it's long-term and somewhat messy. Daniel says he thinks it's important to assess if needs are being met on both sides. Okay, that's good. Megan says it's important for people to understand what can be done about the need and not to get over your head. Okay. Thank you all for your responses. So I wanted to share with you all some key points to consider when you are building partnerships to address community needs. One thing that's very important is when you develop partnerships, you should always remember that it's very important to maintain contact with those partners and keep them up to date. Something that I found useful is when you are keeping them up to date, that you give them some kind of written verbiage to kind of tell them where you are and the progress you have made so far. Developing partnerships are very helpful when you are not only trying to get the word out to people in your community, but also when you're trying to address a matter that is related to all of those people. So finding people who are actually affected by that same issue is definitely important. I see you said, Megan, how often should you keep your partners up to date? I would say that as soon as you maybe make some progress, it's good to kind of inform them as well, or when you commit your first task that you have planned, it's definitely important to let them know. That's a great question. Some good resources that I have found very useful when doing a project that is involving addressing a community need is the Youth Services America 2013 Semester of Service Strategy Guide. This resource could be found on ysa.org/resources. I definitely suggest you guys use that. That is definitely helpful, and it actually has a lot of documents inside of it that you can use however you choose. Another good resource is NYLC's own Generator School Network, which is a free resource and has recently been updated. That's a big one. It actually has other projects that you can look at to take pointers from. I definitely highly suggest that one. And now we will hear a closing quote by Megan.
Thank you, Denasia. So, we have this quote here by Cicero that we really thought would be a great closing quote because we really saw it as a kind of a showcasing of the representation of partnerships, I guess. It explains our purpose of this webinar quite well, which is that nature revolves around a human connection and the continuing improvement of life. We were born to unite with our fellow men and to join in community with the human race. So we really hope you all resonate with this idea as well and understand the important role of partnerships in life.
For those of you who hopefully will be attending our National Service Learning Conference in Washington, D.C. this year, we will have 4 sessions led by the YAC this year, and they include the Introduction to Service Learning, Understanding the K-12 Service Learning Standards, SMART, which deals with youth solutions to addressing the achievement gap, and a workshop on partnerships like this one for those of you who would like to learn more in depth. On behalf of NYLC, we would like to thank you all for joining us this evening, including those who are participating by phone. We have not forgotten about you. We have truly enjoyed you all, and we hope that you have found this webinar useful. Thank you all again, and I hope you all have a great evening.